Okay, so our lesson is going to be looking at the book of Numbers, chapters 13 and 14. So we'll start in chapter 13. And the topic for tonight, if you want to put the topic in, is what captain wants to take you back to Egypt? Let's put it that way. What captain wants to take you back to Egypt? So we know we don't want to go back to Egypt, right? We'd rather go to heaven than go to Egypt. But we ain't going to heaven until it's time. So, okay. So I'm going to talk to you about this. Oop, I just crushed the cap that goes on this. Sorry about that. So I'm going to talk to you about this because without realizing it, you might very well be putting your life in bondage slowly and not realizing what's happening. It's happening one event at a time. So it's not like you're handing yourself over like this. It's happening when you make one decision at a time, and then it accumulates, and the devil comes and says, well, you've given me permission to do all these things. And when you really look at it, you realize, oh yeah, I did. But I really wasn't saying yes to that, but it doesn't matter. You ever got a phone call from the telemarketers, and they always say, our call will be recorded for training purposes. It's not being recorded for training purposes. It's being recorded to catch you say yes to anything. So if they decide to sell you something and send it in the mail and then bill you for it, then they will play back the recording that says, we have on record that you said yes. So don't ever say anything yes. The first thing they do is ask you your name, and of course that you're going to say yes. I just hang up. Because most of the time now it's a recording anyway. So you want to know the wiles of the enemy. And Paul was telling the people in the New Testament, I wouldn't have you to be ignorant of the wiles of the enemy, right? So this story is very well known, so we'll go to that. So in Numbers chapter 13, we'll start from verse 1. It says, Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Send men to spy out the land of Canaan, which I am going to give to the sons of Israel. From each of their fathers' tribes you shall send a man, every one a leader among them. So God was asking Moses to send these spies. Moses didn't come up with this himself. I posted a funny thing on Facebook and I said, now we know the problem of why we had this issue. The men went as spies. When Jesus rose again, the women were the ones who shared the first message. Just one of those men-women jokes, that's all. Nothing to read into here. So from each of their father tribes you shall send a man, every one a leader among them. So Moses sent spies from the wilderness of Paran, and at the command of the Lord, all of them men who were heads of the Israelites. These were their names, and then it goes through and it names all of their names and which tribe they belong to. Okay? So we're going to skip down 17. So verse 17 says, Moses sent them to spy out the land of Canaan and said to them. So first of all, God gave Moses an instruction, right? So Moses' boss is God. He gave Moses an instruction. Now these men, Moses didn't pick the men. He just wanted a leader from the tribe. So the tribe sent their leaders, okay? Now they're all gathered together and Moses is giving them the instruction. He's telling them specifically what he would like. It wasn't like a free-for-all, right? There were specific instructions. So there was nothing vague about this instruction. It was very precise. And they had specific intelligence that they needed to gather, okay? So he said, go up this way into the Negev. He even said where to go. He then go up into the hill country See what the land is like and whether the people who live there are strong or weak. He wasn't asking this question for the sake of should we go in or not. It was how much manpower do we need and how much military, like what do we need? If they're strong, we need something different than if they're weak. Okay? Few or many, how many are there? And whether the land in which they live is good or bad, and whether the cities in which they live are open camps or fortifications. So are they out in the open, or are we talking buildings here that are, barred up? And what the land is, whether it is fat or productive, or lean, whether there's timber on it or not, make an effort to get some of the fruit of the land. Now the time was the time of the first ripe grapes. So they went up and spied the land. So I thought it was interesting that when God told Moses for them to go spy the land, it was in the time where the land would have shown its best because it was harvest time. So they would have had a good indication of what this land could produce for them. There was nothing about this land that showed it to be bad for them. Okay? God sent them at the time where they could see the vision of what he is going to give to them, which should have indicated a time of rejoicing. Okay? So, okay. Verse 21, so they went up and spied out the land from the wilderness to Rehob, all that. When they had gone up to the Negev, the south country, they came to Hebron and blah, blah, blah. Verse 22, then they came to the valley of Eshcol, which is also known as cluster of grapes, and from there cut down a branch with a single cluster of grapes, and they carried it on a pole between two of them with some of the pomegranates and the figs. So the land is so fruitful that they had to have two people carry it, which we all see the storybook drawings and all this stuff. Okay. Now they're in a place that actually grows stuff. They're living in a wilderness that doesn't, right? So it wasn't like this land was kind of close to what they already have, so it's take it or leave it, it's no big deal. Like if we switch, it's not a big deal. It's not going to be that much of an upgrade. Okay, we're talking this is a major upgrade, okay? Where they actually have a variety of fruits versus manna every day. Think about it. This wasn't an even thing here. This was majorly different. Okay? So then let's go to verse 25. When they returned from spying out the land at the end of 40 days, they were living in the lap of luxury for 40 days. They were not eating manna. Think about this. For 40 days, 12 leaders of the children of Israel enjoyed regular food. Even if it was fruit. They ate off the land that they were going to have for 40 days. While their compadres are eating manna. Okay? And they came to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation of the sons of Israel in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh, and brought back word to them and to all the congregation and showed them the land's fruit. So they brought evidence of harvest. They have the evidence of harvest in front of them. Yet, this is their report. They reported to Moses and said, we went into the land where you sent us, and it certainly does flow with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. And that's as good as it got. But the people who live in the land are strong. And the cities are fortified. That means they're walled in and very large. Moreover, we saw there the descendants of Anak, which are the people of the great stature and courage, which would be giants. The Hittite, the Jebusite, and the Amorite live in the hill country. And the Canaanites live by the Dead Sea and along the side of the Jordan. Then Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and take possession of it, for we will certainly conquer it. Okay? So which report do you think would have been more suitable to where God was telling them they were going to go? I think it would be Caleb, wouldn't it? But the men who had gone up with him said, we are not able to go up against the people of Canaan, for they are too strong for us. Now, they're just listing one set of people, right? The people of Canaan, they're too strong for us. We can't go up there. I'm going to sit for this. Is that going to mess up the camera? So they gave the Israelites a bad report about the land, which they had spied out, saying, the land through which we went in spying it out is a land that devours its inhabitants. Now, honest to God, the fact that there were people there, that's a lie. There were people there. When did the land devour them in 40 days? Like, they were there. And all the people that we saw in it are men of great stature. So they didn't see any women there at all. They just saw the men, the tall men. They saw the tall men. There we saw the Nephilim. The sons of Anak are part of the Nephilim. And we were like grasshoppers in our own sight. And so we were in their sight. So now they're speaking for people who devour the land devours. They're speaking not just for them, how they see themselves. They're saying how these tall, big people see them. Mind you, I highly doubt they had a conversation because they were in such fear. I don't think they were sitting down having dinner with the giants. Okay? Let's go to the next chapter. So here we have leaders that are telling the people they lead how inadequate they are to take what God said is theirs. Okay? Numbers 14. Then all the congregation of Israel raised their voices and cried. They cried out. And the people wept that night. All the Israelites murmured in discontent against Moses and Aaron. And the whole congregation said to them, oh, that we had died in the land of Egypt, or that we had died in this wilderness. Anything but going into a promised land. Why is the Lord bringing us to this land of Canaan to fall by the sword? Our wives and children will become plunder. Would it not be better for us to return to Egypt? So they said one to another, let us appoint a new leader and return to Egypt. Do you see the problem there? This is in the Amplified Version, right? The New Living said, let's choose a new leader and go back to Egypt. The King James says, let us make a captain and let us return to Egypt. So they considered what Moses and Aaron did for them, getting them out of slavery from 430 years of slavery. They were behind by 30 years. Because when God spoke to Abraham about them being in slavery, he said 400 years. So for 30 years, somebody in the group didn't get the message of what God had said to their ancestors. And so for 430 years, they were in bondage. Okay? And here comes a deliverer who gets them out of it in miraculous style, operating by the power of God without any question whatsoever. Okay? In the wilderness, they have food, water, and their clothing is fine. They're full of wealth because they plundered the Egyptians of their wealth. By the way, the tabernacle that was built in the wilderness in today's money would be $7 billion. So in today's time, if they had plundered in today's time, they would have had money more than 7 billion among them because they brought too much. It cost 7 billion, but they had brought more than what they needed, right? Now, they had so much more. They had enough to make a golden calf to worship. Do you see how these people, this was wilderness living. This was not the promise. This was wilderness living. And they're murmuring and complaining amongst themselves from the report that they listened to. Right in front of them was presented two reports. The report from the ones who say we are grasshoppers, and the report from the one who said, let's go right now. We can do this. And the whole camp decided to think and cry all night. And that wasn't the worst part. They now started attacking the leaders that God had lead them out of bondage. By the way, the leaders they listened to were the ones who were keeping them in bondage in Egypt. They never did anything for them. They were still their leaders in Egypt, right? They did nothing for them. This new leader that God sent, Moses, who had some issues, so Aaron came along, and they still murmured and grumbled and complained against him. Do you see how the devil steals from you? They saw what they could have. And seeing what they could have triggered them and their inferiority complex. The Bible notes of Caleb that he had a different spirit. He was with them the whole time. Where did he get that spirit from? Why didn't they have that spirit? But think about the journey. They were constantly complaining about what they didn't have. How much Moses brought them out there to make them suffer. Like, seriously. Moses was named the meekest man on earth. There is a very good reason why. For real. Think about it. Right? So I'm talking to you today about who is being chosen among you to be your captain to take you back to Egypt. Because it means that they're causing you to not listen to the leader God has put in your life for freedom. And so you know that starts happening when you start murmuring and complaining against the leader. That's like step one to destruction. Okay? If they can separate you from the credibility of a leader God put in your life, then they can pick you off and give you a new leader that will lead you right back into bondage. So if we keep reading, we see that God said, I've heard what they've been saying. So God's ready to wipe them all off the face of the earth. And he said to Moses, I will create a new people from you. Forget these guys. I can make a whole new nation right from you, Moses. We can start from you. And Moses said, really? Moses was having his conversation with God about these people who wanted to kill him. Think about it. Moses is fully aware of what they're doing, but yet he interceded for them. That's the difference between a hireling and a real shepherd, right? And so he's interceding for them and giving God an argument, a case, presenting a case as to why, if God did that, what it would look like for God. And so God said, Okay, fine, but these people are not going into the promised land. So anybody that was 20 years and older, so that means only the teenagers and children would get it. Do you see that? 19 and younger would get what God had for them. But they had to wait till the other people died. And God set up a system where for every day that they spied out for 40 days, it would be equivalent to 1 year that they would spend in the wilderness until the last person died off. Could you imagine being the last one to die? Everybody in the camp's waiting. Are they dead yet? Yeah, want help? Are they dead yet? Let's help them out. No manna for you today. These people murmured, grumbled, and complained against God and his leader and was still eating the food God was giving them. Still drinking the water he provided. Still had all the wealth that they plundered the Egyptians of. Do you see how the devil can mess up the business God wants to do with you? But in order to do this, there has to be a new leader picked for your life. This is what I want to point out to you. The devil wouldn't lead you alone. He has to have an influencing partner that he can tell things to, that they can tell to you. Because if he gets too close, you'll figure it out soon enough. But when you build relationships with people, it's tougher to break because you have a relationship with them. Do you see? So how do we detect, everybody's staring at me today. Are you learning what I'm saying? Are you getting what I'm saying? The devil wants your stuff. So he is going to come. He cannot take your stuff without your permission. If the devil could have taken the promised land for the children of Israel without them being able to do anything about it, he would have burned the place down, caused the land, the ground to throw acid on it or something. He could have done all those things so that it stopped producing, so that the buildings are gone. So when they go in there, there's nothing. He can't do that. What God has for us is also being protected by God for us. Okay? So these are things you have to know. See, if you go into the relationship you have with God for your future, thinking of it in the same level that you do every other relationship in your life, you're going to miss the mark. And you're going to lose valuable things that God has for your life because you are seeing everything from the natural. So here, these reports that came in, they're verifying what God says. Yes, the land is flowing with milk and honey. But here's the thing. We are not capable of acquiring such land. Do you see what it is? It has nothing to do with the truth that God does have this for you. Yes, absolutely. But you can't go take it. They'll beat you up. Do you see the difference? So in order for you to maintain your weakness, a captain has to be assigned to you to keep you weak so that you can be led somewhere else. Because God's leading of his people was set up to lead them into the promised land. For the devil to take you in a different direction, he's got to pick another leader for you because Moses wasn't going to take him back. Do you see this? So here's the question for you. We have ladies in here from different places. Here's my question for you. When you go to your church, are you going there with the thought process of getting to where God wants you to be for your particular life and your family line? Or are you going there to pick a little bit of information here, pick a little information there, pick a little? Is there a specific direction that you are heading because you're there. Does that make sense? If you don't have a place, you have to have stability. God gathered all of them in the wilderness. Think about it. God could have freed the Israelites and do a good old divide and conquer thing, right? He could have sent them off to different countries. He could have scattered them around. It would have been difficult for the Egyptians to go after them that way, wouldn't it? He literally led them all out together. And they were in a wilderness. They solely had to depend on him. Did he ever disappoint them? No, never. But what happens in the church today is that people go as a duty, like, I got to do church. And you could miss valuable reasons why and what you should get out of it. Does that make sense? You should have a specific instruction that God's given you for your future and your children's future, your grandchildren's future, your nieces and nephews, the people you're supposed to mentor with your gifts and abilities so the earth isn't void of it when you leave. All those things, there should be a direction for them. You just don't have these gifts for no direction at all. Well, God will pick leaders to put you with so they can help take you there. If you look at Jesus's entire ministry, he never stuck around to convince anybody of who he is because he was confident about who he was and what his mission was. So one of the traps of intimidation for leaders is to prove yourself to people who don't think that you're worthy, that you're good enough, or that you can even do the job. That right there is a derailment of your purpose. It's a derailment and a misuse. And frankly, it is a diminishing of your gift. It's devaluing the gift of leadership in you and all of the anointing that God's put in your life to be in that position.